Good morning, St. Louis, as we bring you here on the City Hub postgame on Sports Hub STL. It's an early morning in St. Louis, and we're here to talk a little soccer on Sports Hub STL. I'm your host for today, joined by my analyst, Will Bratton. Will, how you doing after watching, well, more of an unfortunate game than we expected, I think?
You know what? I'm ready for bed. That's how I'm feeling. It's been 180 minutes of football with no goals. You know, it's not what you want to see, but at the end of the day, you end your first two matches undefeated with 2 clean sheets, and those are positives to take forward. There's definitely, good things to think about, but it's certainly frustrating. From a fan perspective, you want to see goals.
Yeah, and you know what? If you're watching right now, make sure you comment on the YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe on the YouTube as well. Also, all the socials all over Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, what have you. Dubes Val jumping in says, need this breakdown, while Jake Play says, I'm only here for Will. So let's jump right in, Will. Let's get your thoughts on two big things. Obviously, we want to get your thoughts overall in the game, but let's do this a little bit chronologically. Let's jump into your thoughts about an hour before the game. When we saw the starting lineup, we saw some changes from the opening game of the season. Conrad Wallem, the new addition, goes into the spot we all expected him to be in for a long period of time. Obviously, he was getting acclimated. That is that spot over on the left wing back spot. And then we saw a change up top. No more Bescher and Klaus. We saw Teuscher and Bescher get the start. So let me get your thoughts on the opening lineup for tonight, and then a little bit about what we saw from some of those differences throughout the game.
Yeah, I think Wallem sliding in at the left wing back is good. I think that's really the realistic future that we have here. I think he's going to be our best option in that position. I think he had a good game. He wasn't super impactful, but he had a couple. One of our really only even remotely threatening offensive chances was completely created by him. I think he's definitely one to watch. I wasn't overly impressed with his play tonight, but I wasn't really overly impressed with anybody going forward. So it's kind of, you can't knock him for that. Looking up top at Betcher and Teuscher, I'm totally okay with riding the hot wagon of whoever's, Betcher's feeling himself. He had that goal pulled back. Now you've got Teuscher back and he's fit this time. I'm okay with throwing Klaus on the bench for this game. He just played 90, a week ago. I'm okay with throwing him on the bench for this game and trying it out. I like that Milberg's willing to try that. But it was very obvious that it had its drawbacks early on. We see a lack of a target, no really good communication. We're not generating anything up top. We can't use them up top to advance the ball. Our midfield was kind of struggling with what to do in a very crowded San Diego defensive midfield situation. So it definitely wasn't ideal for us. But, when I first saw the lineup, a little bit of confusion, but I wasn't horribly upset. It was more of, I'm curious to see how this unfolds. And now we've got some lessons to take away from it.
Yes, we do. Conrad Maloney joining us on the YouTube chat. That was abysmal. Yeah, it wasn't great.
Conrad.
A complete reversal of the game previous. Obviously, they completely outclassed the Colorado Rapids to the tune of 18 shots to the Rapids 2, and everything got completely flipped on its head, allowing 15 shots to San Diego and only putting up 2 themselves. So, yeah, it wasn't a great game. Scuba 13 comes in and says St. Louis Ambien SC, and that's because they haven't scored a goal yet this season in the regular season. It's 2 0-0 draws, so no goals scored. Olaf Milberg was asked about that. He, didn't have any problem with the offense in the first game, and so, he's not worried about the season off the rip right now, but obviously not too happy with what he saw in the offense, as they were fortunate to get away with a draw in this game. Something like you wanted to talk about really with that change up top, and I knew that was going to be a big catalyst, especially if they didn't score any goals, or if Bescher did score a goal, or if Klaus did come off the bench and score a goal, which really could have changed things up. I knew that would be a catalyst. Your thoughts on kind of dive into that X's and O's problem, I guess, that did kind of develop from that change, which is maybe a lack of what we usually get from Klaus early on in the games, and maybe there just wasn't enough to establish that kind of game later on. I know you're kind of diving in a little bit into what are we losing when we don't start Klaus. I know it's a lot of people's idea, but clearly I think something is missing when you don't have him for the first 60 minutes.
Absolutely. And what you're missing is somebody who can cause problems on the back line and really hold his back to the goal and create space. The biggest issue that you see when you're running just Toy Shirt and Betcher is that you're playing two players on the pitch that mostly rely on a target 9 to play around or underneath or alongside, especially Toy Shirt.
Yes, and then to your point there,
relies on Klaus.
Yes, and Toysher talked about that a lot last year, about his favorite thing. He's specifically off the shoulder of a striker, and how many times last year did he just get a goal because he kind of just picked up a loose ball that was created by a chaos of a header that Klaus wasn't able to completely control, but he was able to kind of smack down in the area, and then Toysher just runs on it and makes the play there. You're 100% right. Two guys who really like having the striker. Keep on rolling with that.
Yeah, absolutely. You need your clinical finisher underneath your target, right? Your target isn't necessarily going to be scoring bangers every 5 minutes, but they're creating all the opportunities. And that's what we saw from Joao Klaus at the tail end of 2024. It's what we saw from him against Colorado. We didn't see it from him tonight, but we didn't see anything from anybody tonight. So like I said, I can't really say a lot of negatives towards that because we never got the ball past the midfield. Every time we touched the ball tonight, it was a defensive clearance after like the first 30 minutes because we were scared to progress the ball. And that's a whole separate issue. But talking about just the striker situation, you want to hate on somebody as a fan. You want to point a finger, right? But you can't in this situation. You can't point at Klaus, for Colorado or tonight and say, this is your fault. The same way you can't point at Betcher or even Toy Shirt. I think that, Toy Shirt was a ghost tonight, and I don't think it's his fault. Like, ironically, I think he relies on a Klaus. He's on a Klaus-like figure. He's a false 9. That's his bread and butter. Like Rock said, he talks about it in his interviews. That's what he wants to do. The same way Leuven talks about wanting to sit a little bit further back and kind of have more freedom on the pitch. It's the same thing, just different position, right? Toy Shirt needs a target 9. We, St. Louis City SC, need a target 9. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you know ball, we need that target 9. So I'm excited to see what we can try and do to resolve this situation, because clearly something's got to change quickly, or we're going to go to Galaxy for our Sunday night soccer debut and get a quick dose of reality.
And I really think another part of it, and Olaf talked about this, is Klaus's role as a guy who drops back into the midfield in build-up play early on, because he's already deeper there, because he usually pressed back, so that makes sense for his positioning. Him making some of that hold-up play, because I think when people hear target forward, they immediately think, oh, he's in the box and he's making those plays. A lot of that hold-up plays is coming from deeper, so you have move areas for Bescher and Toy Shirt to run onto. And so I think sometimes in your head, it's kind of a countermanding thing, but he's getting deeper, and that's going to be his role. I know that bothers people with Klaus, but That was his role then. It's still his role now. You mentioned something that I wanted to touch on because it was what Olaf talked about in the postgame. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. It's almost 12:30 in St. Louis right now. We still got some people watching us tonight. If you have any questions or comments about your game, your thoughts from the game, if you're just kind of ticked off, if that's what you spent your Saturday night on, let us know in the chats right here on Sports Hub SEO. We will get those chats right on there, and we can throw them right up. In fact, we can do it right now. Ethan Thornton says we haven't conceded all year. Exactly. That's the bright side. We're going to talk about that a little more. But when I bring it up to you is this is why I'm glad we waited to talk to Olaf before we jumped on, is because he said exactly, you said something he said, which was, and I'm pulling from the quote here, the first 15 minutes, he wasn't happy with how the offense played. We could have been much more confident on the ball. Ended up with Roman too many times playing backward. There were nice spaces to find, and we didn't really exploit them. I thought we could have done better. So getting into that and zeroing in really quickly on that, more confident on the ball. Build up, the lack of build up, that was obviously the biggest talking point with Olaf in a very truncated post-game press conference today. What jumped out to you as the biggest issue in the buildup? Was it the fact that the counter press was ineffective because they could never get enough bodies up front to actually make it work? Because if they got those many bodies up front, they were going to get murdered on the back end. Stop me if that sounds familiar for 2023 or 2024 City. Was it a lack of just the short passing and the connection? Was there a player you thought that was really missing from that connection? Did you see, Will, that was really the problem with the buildup, considering it is, based on what Olaf told us, the biggest problem with the offensive side of the ball today?
I think credit to San Diego FC. I think they did a really great job isolating Edouard Leuven and limiting his ability to be the maestro in the midfield, kind of dictating where St. Louis is going to push through, what lane are we going to attempt to attack. I think Leuven didn't really have much of any effect in this match, and I think that's the biggest problem. Because he's kind of our outlet guy, right? He's going to find Akil Watts, or he's going to look direct to our target or our forwards, and that's how we're going to advance the ball in the midfield, dropping off to Hartle underneath a lot of the time. These are the types of patterns that we've seen, since the summer window, and we've made these new acquisitions, and that's going to be a continued theme for us. So if we're unable to do that in the first few minutes of the game in a crazy environment, the fans going absolutely nuts. Every time San Diego touched the ball in our half of the pitch, the crowd was going crazy for the first 20 minutes. It was so funny. I love that.
We'll talk about the San Diego crowd a little bit later.
Oh yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later. There was a lack of cohesiveness. And to your point, I think it's probably everyone playing a little bit below their level of game. Leuven, probably is guilty on spraying a couple, of those long passes that didn't have a very high rate of actual completion or going anywhere in the long run. Leuven's probably guilty of that. Hartel had some missed touches.
So many flicks.
Yeah, some weird flicks. He also had, I don't think any of his crosses really found home at all. So Hartel didn't have a great game. Again, Teuscher didn't get involved at all. Partially on the offensive end is him not, again, having the target person to play off of. But also 6 touches in a half. Yeah. And him never, he never, other than just being the secondary presser and kind of forcing maybe a pass to the outside, I just never felt like he ever got involved in the press at a level you really needed him to. And part of that's going to be the reasoning that Olaf gave for why we saw Chris Durkin at the half, which is that Cedric wasn't going to go more than 45 minutes. And so it's a little odd to me that you played him in a game where he could only go 45, and in that 45, it didn't look like he could run like he needed to in a system that you were going to run where he was going to have to be one of the main 4 guys pressing. Because, again, this is what's jumping out to me the most from that first half, especially the first 20 minutes. And that's something that's weird about this game, is that we probably should be talking about this game like it's 2 games, which is the first 20 minutes before Irving Chucky Lozano gets hurt, and then the next 70 minutes when he's gone. Because I think if he's healthy, I tweeted this out, City loses that game probably by 2 goals. Because they were absolutely exploiting the back line. They were getting through. They were shredding everybody. And so, but not to break those things up, get back to what we were talking about, which is the offensive issues, which I think then gets back to the fact that they couldn't press at all. And if you can't press, and if you can't force a bad pass, and you can't get the ball in advantageous areas, and you're then always chasing on the back end, so that when you do win the ball, it's chaotic. No one's on the front foot. Everyone's on the back heel. A lot of these things are connected, as they always will be. And I really think that, to your point, no one played well, and there's a lot of different tangential reasons why nothing works. I want to get to Jake Plays, who didn't listen to a word I just said. He's only here for you, Will. Jake Plays, he says, not enough 1v1 attacking attempts. I don't agree with that statement, because I think unless you have guys who are truly elite at that, i.e. a Celio Pompeu, doing those kind of things, I think it's a very inefficient way to generate goals in soccer, especially in the MLS. But if you have those players and they're out there and they're getting comfortable, like a Celio could have done if he would have been out there for longer than the last 7 or 8 minutes, maybe. But I'm not seeing that as being the reason why we didn't see this. Now, to Jake Play's credit, maybe the idea of more 1v1 attacking attempts connects to having more confidence with the ball. And if that's what you're going for, then you're absolutely right. That's straight out of the horse's mouth with Olaf. What do you think?
Yeah. I agree with that. I think confidence was a big issue. Like I was talking about with Leuven earlier, as soon as he got isolated in that midfield and he was getting shut down, everything was long. We were all just dumping the ball. There was no direction, no progression. And that was a big problem. But you're absolutely right on the point of Celio Pompeu. That's a guy who can blow open a game like that. And, but here's one thing that we do have that was underutilized, though, is, Conrad Vollum he's that guy. He can do that too. And we saw that in preseason. And we saw that tonight, and basically one of our only even remotely dangerous moments was Vollum on the left-hand side takes a guy on one-on-one, beats him, creates space, ball into the box, ends up being pretty harmless. But those are the types of opportunities we need to create if we want to get some chaos in the box with guys like Betcher and Teuscher who thrive in those situations. So that's the type of stuff we needed to do more of. And, Tottenham's not the guy who's going to be able to just constantly take guys one-on-one on the right-hand side. And Vollum didn't do it enough on the left-hand side, so we were just left in limbo.
Absolutely. And just a stat I'm pulling out here that kind of accentuates how problematic the offense is. The only player on City, and this is a foot mob stat, I haven't confirmed it on some of the other sites, excuse me. The only player with multiple touches in the opponent's box today for St. Louis City SC, João Klaus.
I was just about to say, I know the answer is João Klaus. Fans are going to hate this. They're not going to be happy.
No, they're going to be fine with it because he got one good chance and he didn't put nearly enough mustard on it. And people are just going to hone in on that factor. Not that he got 0.27 of like their total 0.3 xGOT. So we're not going to focus on that part. We're going to focus on the negative part. Speaking of focusing on the negative, Benjamin Vonau, I apologize when I just butchered your last name there, sir. What's the hype on this coach? So not impressed with him. Announcer stated he is building a foundation defensively and not doing the same with the offensive side. I think part of that statement has to do with the fact that the problem with this team last year was defense. And so a lot of the credit to him has been rebuilding the defense. Obviously, the fact that he was a center back his career and a very good center back, one of the best center backs to ever play for his country in Sweden, one of in a very good Premier League center back as well, which means he's top of the world in that category as well, just because he played in the Premier League. And so I think that's why they're focusing on the defense. And I think so far as who was it? It was Ethan Thornton said, and Jake Plays agreed. They haven't conceded all year. And the hype on the coach is that he did a lot with a team that had a very small budget and a very large academy system, one of the largest academy systems in the entire world. And despite that, they still have an extremely small budget and have to fight for promotion and against relegation constantly. And usually when he was the coach, they were fighting for promotion. And that's a lot of the hype about him. On the personal side, if we're just, being just flat out, just like honest about things that are true, he's the best looking coach in St. Louis sporting history. And I know that's a weird thing to bring up. It's just a fact. I'm just sorry. It's a fact. Google it. It's true. I'm just saying it. It has nothing to do with him on the field. I'm just saying it's a true fact right now. Your thoughts so far on what we've seen from Olaf Melberg's system and his hair?
Yeah, I think first of all, great looking dude. He
is. It's just a fact. I'm sorry, people.
You gotta love a personable coach, and he's very to the point in his pressers, and I really respect that. He appreciates a good analytical question. But talking about him actually as a coach, one thing to point out is let's not get crazy here and forget that we are one of 3 clubs in the league that have not conceded a goal so far. It is us, LAFC, and San Diego, who we just drew 0-0. So, of course, they're not going to concede if we don't score. And so it's, us two, and then LAFC is the outlier. Only clubs haven't conceded. And so when you talk about setting a foundation defensively, that's what you're talking about. Berkey's had to make one significant save in these 180 minutes of football. And when you think about it from that perspective and you just pretend we scored goals, you're very happy defensively.
We need to just focus on that too, because I think that's also 15 total shots, but 1 shot on target.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like the defense, and this is why I also think we do need to split this game up into 2, because this conversation is different again if Lozano's healthy that full game. There's no doubt about that. So the defense does not look that good if he's there the whole game. Maybe they get 1 goal in the first half and Melberg's able to pivot. We get Durkin, that Durkin sub still, and they're able to solidify things. He talked a lot about how they were getting beat up the middle, and Durkin came in to really solidify this positioning up the middle. So maybe that stops it from getting bad, but you can't convince me that from the whatever minute it was that Lozano got injured to the 45th minute, he wasn't putting a goal in at some point. And so, but other than that, take away one of the most talented players, arguably, to come into the MLS in the last 5 years. When he was leaving Pachuca, this is a guy who was worth like $45 million on the transfer market, back in like 2016 and things like this. Irving Lozano is a legitimate big time talent, and his speed and his wheels has always been one of his best and most useful attributes. And so you have to qualify. They're getting paid too. The old college line, they's on scholarship too. And so you have to give credit to San Diego, like you've been doing this entire time so far, Will. And I think that's very important. By the way, everyone, you're watching the City Hub post game presented by Hot Shots right here on Sports Hub STL. If you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button here on YouTube. Go follow us around all over your other social medias. That way you can get different kind of notifications every time we do these post-game shows. We're doing these post-game shows after all live events across St. Louis sports. This is number 5 of 5 today. Technically, I think it's actually number 1 of 2 on Sunday, but we're not going to get technical with it. It's far too early to be doing math. Although Chat City Tactics usually does some math here, so we might be screwing ourselves. Evening, lads. The sky is falling if you haven't heard, and social media is ablaze. Trying to imagine how different these comments are if Kessler's left toenail wasn't offside last weekend.
Absolutely. That's a really good point to think about.
That.
That's true. A really good point to think about.
And you know what? I tweeted about that as well. Which was, I think it's there's something special about soccer that you can dominate a game and get your teeth kicked in a game, and you'd think, hey, at least we got 3 points, and yet somehow, because of the specialty of soccer, you're actually even in a shittier position, and you only have 2 points. So you're even 1 point short of like what you should expect, which is, well, we won one because we played really well, and we lost one because we played really bad. And yet you're even worse position than that. And so a very interesting take here from Chat City Tactics. Yeah, I know people obviously are freaking out about the offense, but and to go back to Benjamin's point earlier, the announcer stated that he's building a foundation defensively, and he's not doing the same with the offensive side. Well, let's just be objective about this. Edward Leuven is still playing a very similar role that he played last year, if not a more extreme role than he played last year. Hartel's moved back, but we know what we have in Hartel. Klaus is playing the exact role that everyone has been complaining about him playing for the last year and a half, which is he's your pressing striker. He's also your target striker at times, and he's going to wade back into the midfield, and then he's going to get forward. He's going to go wide. He's going to do whatever he wants. All of the offensive principles, all the offensive foundations were here, and he didn't need to build upon them. He had to build the defensive foundations. So you're not wrong, Benjamin, but that's not a bad thing. And that, I think going forward, that's something that you can say, well, listen, the offense is struggling, but in fairness, this is a team that probably focused a lot on defense in the preseason, and now Olaf's saying, okay, we got the foundation. Me as a center back, I'm happy we're not conceding anything. Now we got to start building some goals out. Yeah. The question, though, is how are they going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's $1 million question. And you know what? The great thing is they've got a week to figure it out. If we net, 2 against the Galaxy next weekend, it's going to be a different conversation. The panic button's going to be thrown out the window until the next time we lose a game, because that's just unfortunately the reality of the world we live in. We have a very big panic button in St. Louis that people like to push very quickly. So,
especially when it comes to St. Louis City SC, I've noticed.
Oh, yeah.
Ethan Thornton, once the goals start flowing in, people will see the vision. I think that's a very good point. But at the same time, I'm trying to tell people, I don't think the offensive vision is that different than what we've seen. It's just right now things didn't click on the finishing side for Bescher in game number 1, and today they kind of got bum rushed by a team, and no one played, their peak game other than Henry Kessler, and that was him screwing up somebody else's attack, not doing what they did. Speaking of
Kessler's
Kessler,
a monster.
Yes. Speaking of Kessler, speaking of what they did after Lozano goes down, the defense did have a very solid game. Again, only 1 shot on target. So Henry Kessler has an incredible game. The defensive structure really does seem to be coming into its own. So going back to that great chat from Benjamin, he is building a defensive foundation. What are you seeing from that defensive foundation through 180 minutes, Will?
Yeah, I'm seeing composure, right? You're seeing a back line. Now, I will say at times we got a little bit flat, a 5 across the back straight line, and that made me a little bit nervous. But every single time that we ended up in that situation, we did find a way out of it. What I'm seeing, though, is I'm seeing consistency from players that, maybe you didn't expect to be, big time defensive options for us in 2025 if you were thinking ahead back in 2023 or 2024, and guys like Josh Yarrow, Kyle Heber, right? Now you have Giannis Horn, who just put Andres Dreyer on absolute lockdown for the entire night, which is, that is no small feat. That's very impressive. And, while Kessler absolutely had a monster game, I think it's important to highlight Giannis Horn as well in that regard. And even Kyle Hiebert, while Kyle Hiebert sometimes scares me with the ball at his feet, when the ball's in front of him, he's a monster, dude. We've got some really elite level players on our back line right now. And I feel very confident going forward. These are great, things that we're seeing. We've just played basically 90 straight minutes of defense. Plus, we had a lot of defense we played against Colorado. We didn't, dominate very much in possession in that game. Tonight, we got dominated in possession. And yet we have conceded 0 goals through both those matches. Imagine when the offense gets going and we're spending more time in the attacking third. The chances that are really going to be coming against us are going to be very minuscule. They're going to be far and few between. And if the opponent doesn't capitalize on the few chances they get, we're going to continue to see clean sheets, piling up for Kessler's back line and Roman Berkey. So, these are really positive things to look forward to going forward. I think the defensive structure is very composed. They like to stay in front of the ball. It's just everything has just been very beautiful on that back line.
How do you weigh the rest of Kyle Hiebert's game with so much space behind the back line being exposed off the rip? And so, how much of that do we blame on the central midfield getting diced up and allowing so much buildup to be so easy for San Diego? How much do you just say, listen, Kyle Hiebert's a great player, Irving Lozano is a greater player, and sometimes you just got to say you're not winning foot races against Tricky Lozano, and so you just got to throw in the towel on that one. So and I think that's probably what we're going to agree on, and that's more legitimate because I saw a lot of people, again, I saw some criticism for Hiebert because of those opening 20 minutes. And again, he didn't shut down Lozano. I'm not trying to say he did. I'm just saying is that the context around what happened, which is getting beat over the top by one of the fastest players in the MLS, is, yes, it's a skill issue to a point, but it's also a scheming issue.
It's is that really upsetting? Is that unexpected? Right?
Yeah, is it unexpected, I think, is the best question. Because it is upsetting to watch it happen in the moment, but is it unexpected, I think, is the important question. And the answer would be no. But to your point, take away the moments where he's getting beat by a long ball over the top, which, again, is then playing too high of a line, which is what Taylor Twellman was commenting on early in the game. Take those things away, and Kyle Hiebert had a very good game. He was one of the best defenders on City when it came to duels. He was second in City with defensive actions. Number 1 was Henry Kessler with 15. Kyle Hiebert had 12. He was the only other player with double-digit defensive actions alongside Kessler. Also, Yepi Zirkov, who was the player of the match, had 13 defensive actions. So a similar play there. He had 7 clearances. Kessler had 11. He had 4 headed clearances, which tied for the game lead alongside Kessler. So, I mean, Kyle Hiebert, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of different ways to quantify. He had a very solid game after things settled down. Speaking of the defense, here's a quote coming out from Roman Berkey in the postgame. If you compare our performance that we had in games like this last season, we would never have gotten away with a point. We played really good defensively, and that's not just the defense, the whole team. I think they were just a really good fighting performance from our side. Good job by our friend Jeremy Clements for getting that out there on Twitter. That is Roman Berkey from the postgame. It's pretty much a lot of what we've been saying there, and very complimentary from a captain who last year was very critical of his team. And I think I was
just about to talk about that.
Maybe I'm being too nitpicky here, but I felt like draws last year, Berkey was not happy and was very much like, we just wasted a chance to get points. And while he wasn't necessarily happy last week, he was very positive about the fact that they had a lot to build on, despite the fact that they dropped 2 points. And that comment right there, again, is a lot of positivity from a guy who, yes, I think part of this might be the fact that they're not 1-1 ties, they're 0-0 ties, and he's still getting clean sheets. But still, the positivity from Berkey, I think, does say a lot.
You want to see that from your captain, right? Because that goes right into the locker room. When you've got your captain, Dortmund legend, big name guy, and he's confident in your back line, that's going to continue to translate to success on the pitch. So you have comfort in your back line, right? Now the midfield, feels a little less pressure, right? And maybe they know that they can be a little more creative because that back line is so rock steady right now that, if they make a small mistake, they're not going to get immediately punished for it the majority of the time, right? So they can feel a little more confident going forward, and that's going to directly translate to better things in the attack. So, you talk about leadership, and that's the type of thing you want to see out of Roman Bürki, especially, not just being a Debbie Downer in general and just actually highlighting the fact that, while we just went 2 matches scoreless, 2 extremely good defensive performances, and I would argue the 2 single best defensive performances in the history of this organization.
There you go. I like what you're throwing out there. All right, let's jump into some players we did and did not see, and that are raising some questions and giving us some confidence. The big one, obviously, we saw Chris Durkin get in. We talked about him already. Him getting back from that knee soreness is a big thing, and obviously Celio Pompeu getting into the match late, looking good on that newly constructed ankle or leg, I should say. We love seeing Celio back. From that moment, that very first training came where he was jogging along doing I don't think they call it the beep test anymore. I forgot what they call it now. But he's doing the what is it? Pacer test. Thank you. The pacer test. He's doing the pacer test. To see him make this return from such a gruesome injury, it was great to see Durkin. It was really great to see Celio. Obviously going forward, interesting to see how Celio is going to be incorporated. I think, as a backup for Hartel in that attacking center midfield role where you're on the left side and you can do some stuff with Wallum and different things depending on who's playing out on the wing. We saw him playing a little bit more like a second striker alongside Klaus, both the Brazilians up top today. So I think there are roles for Celio to get involved in this system. Obviously, Durkin, we know where he slots in, where Akil Watts has usually been, or with Akil Watts in a game like now when you really want to defensively control the midfield. I was impressed with these short roles we saw from Celio and really impressed, honestly, with the full half we saw from Durkin.
Yeah, I think Durkin had a great half, and I think it's a consistent thing that we saw in 2023, which is that the performance of Chris Durkin is going to almost always go under the radar because he's doing that workhorse role in the middle. He's not flashy. He's very consistent. He's not going to really surprise you, right? You expect him to make these good plays, and he's going to continue to deliver on them. So, kudos to Chris Durkin for that. And it's great to see him back, with the knee inflammation and everything that was going on is a little worrisome as we, approach the start of the season, not really seeing him in preseason. But, he's back and he puts in a great shift. And, you love to see Celio Pompeu back on the pitch after, a season-ending injury that stopped a breakout season. It's heartbreaking, so you love to see him back on the pitch. I don't care whether he did good or bad tonight. I just care that he was back on the pitch for a couple of minutes, and now that Band-Aid is ripped off and we can focus on his actual play, the next time he's on the pitch. And to kind of answer the question of what that looks like, I think it's a way that we can change the formation up and get a little more attack going and kind of put more pressure on the opposition's defensive line. And basically what will look like a 3-4-3 where we've got our 3 back, we've got our 4 in the middle. Maybe we take out Hartle in the 60th minute or something like that. And we put Celio like at this left forward kind of position. So you've got Klaus up above and you've got, maybe a toy shirt underneath as well. And you have so many dynamic options, but you also have defensive security, and that's really important. So I think that's a spark plug way that we can get Celio incorporated. And then, of course, you take out Toyshirt when he gets tired. You got Betcher in there, too. And all of a sudden, you're looking at a crazy, energetic, forward 3, looking at Klaus Betcher and Celio Pompeu with guys like Leuven or maybe sub for Alfredo Morales and Akil Watts that can be those playmakers and create these opportunities for them. And you've got guys like Totland and Wallum on the sides. There's so many options with Celio Pompeu. I really love the roster that we've built.
I'm gonna throw out a question because we still got a good chunk of people watching. Want to get some comments here on Sports Hub STL on the YouTube page. If you're watching right now, we're talking about the offense. A lot of the struggles today. We saw 2 changes in the starting 11 from game 1 to game 2. So from game 2 to game 3, you're going to face off against the Galaxy. You need a win. You're going to need to score goals, see some offense. What changes do people want to see in that starting 11? Do they want to see the trigger get pulled on a player who maybe isn't at 100%, but to get that big first half out of them like we saw from Toyshirt today? Do we get a Celio Pompeu start like we saw from Toyshirt? Do you want to see Klaus back in the starting lineup with Besher? Do you want to go a little bit more conservative on defense? You can go a little bit more aggressive on the offensive side, maybe get a couple more attacking-minded players out there like a Celio Pompeu instead of playing with 5 defensive-minded players. Let me know what you guys think out there about some changes you want to see because, again, the offense is going to be a big part. And one more thing, could this player be a factor going forward? Tomas Ostrak not on the lineup today, but luckily Olaf Melberg did give us a little information because Tomas Ostrak was one of the players who actually participated with City 2's preseason match earlier this weekend alongside Michael Wenzel and Joey Zielinski, hence why the bench was a little bit shorter overall. And the way that Olaf was talking about it seemed like more minutes were available for City 2, and that gets those players, including a guy like Ostrak, who's still working back to 100% because of an injury, that gives him more minutes to ramp up. So maybe we even see a Tomas Ostrak get involved next week as a way to maybe get more possession, more build-up in the midfield, because we know last year he really was able to bring that.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that we get that context there because you think about a player coming back from injury, and the most important thing is getting your rhythm and your confidence back, right? So getting Ostrak in with City 2 against some, lesser competition, let him get some minutes in, let him get comfortable, confident on the ball, and then you bring him back and you let him go to work. This is a targeted allocation money player that you're paying $700,000 a year. And we haven't really gotten a ton of value out of during this time. But he's got a lot to offer. Injury really held him back, and I would love to see, what we can squeeze out of him here in 2025.
Great chat, great comment here. Well, great chat from Chat City Tactics. City have more shots on target than their opponents in every game this season. Yes, City did finish with 2 shots on target. Both of their total shots today were 2 shots on target. The 1 shot on target for San Diego in this game, because that's just the insanity of how this game works. And in fact, if you break it down,
that line was amazing.
The XGOT from this game is 0.05 on their 1 shot from San Diego FC. On the other side, City was able to get 0.0x GOT from Akil Watts' attempt and 0.27x GOT from Klaus's attempt. So 0.32x GOT for City to 0.05 XGOT for San Diego FC, which tells you sometimes stats lie.
I was going to say, stats didn't match the eye test for that one for sure. There's always...
Sometimes they lie blatantly. Wow, yeah. That's bad. The game, yeah, that's ridiculous.
If you think about it, the stats themselves aren't lying. It's just the fact that those stats are not indicative of who is truly controlling the attack in that game. Those are only looking at the shots that found the target.
Oh, we should also pay attention to the 72% possession.
Yeah, that might be indicative.
Or the how about the 631 accurate passes to the 216?
Yeah, that's a shocking number. That's the worst one for me. The possession doesn't bother me as much because we're not going to be a high possession
600
team,
to 200.
But 600 to 200 passes, absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's why I want to throw out that question to Chad about like what they wanted to see next game, because you have to get 3 points against Galaxy. It would just, again, you walk away with another draw. And that's essentially like you lost 2 of those 3 first games of the season because you're only sitting there with 3 points. And so you have to walk away with 3 points, and you got to get some offense going to do that. I doubt we'll see Celio, but then again, I would have doubted that we were going to see a start from Cedric Toyshirt had we asked this question, Friday night from City Park or last week. And so I don't think we're going to see a Celio. I'd like to. A Tomas Ostrak, honestly, saying it kind of makes sense. Their issue today was a complete lack of buildup, and that's what we know. Again, progression, buildup, he can do that. He's a little bit more fleet of foot than Toyshirt. He doesn't have the mindset of a Durkin or an Akil Watts, but maybe he's just can run a little bit more than Toyshirt and give you some more press up on that front side than you thought. I don't know. What your thoughts? I know we haven't had a lot of time to think of it, but anything you're thinking right out of the gate that you want to see different going into that Galaxy matchup to get this offense going a little bit?
I would love to go bold. I would love to go with the 3-4-3. I think you can't take an Akil Watts out of the game who's just, begging for a breakout season at this point. he was even, the only player confident enough to challenge Dos Santos tonight in the entire first half. Yep. And really in the entire game, besides Joao Klaus's attempt. And, when you think about it from that perspective and you look at his performance against Colorado, which was monumental, I don't think you can take him off the pitch right now. I think Ustrak would be great, but if Akil Watts is fit for 90, I think he needs to be playing 90 against Galaxy. In the same breath, I will say, I think we need to change what we're doing on attack. I think getting someone like Celio Pompeu on the pitch, is it bold? Yes, but you're playing the defending MLS Cup champions on the road. They've lost one game at home, and it was their previous game in the last, 2 years of MLS play. That's the only game they've lost at home. They're 17-1 in 4 or something at home, and one of those draws was us last year. So, you think about all these different components, and you want to see if you can replicate, something similar to what San Diego did, which was cause problems on the back line, right? How do you do that? You put 3 psychopaths at the front that want to just run it down and go crazy. And that's where you put in my opinion, you let Teuscher come in late to the game. You put on Celio, you put on Joao Klaus, and you put on Simon Betcher to start the game as your forward 3. And then you get, your 3-back system, and then you put a guy like Giannis Horn potentially, or Conrad Vollum, that are more defensive-minded on that left wing. You put Totland, who's more defensive-minded, on that right wing, and you just let the boys go to work. I'm not sure if Olaf is going to like that idea or if that's something that he's got in the cards, but if I was the manager, and I like to believe that I am at times, that is definitely the direction I would be exploring in training to see if it worked. I wouldn't jump the gun, but I would love to explore that option. I think it could be very lethal for City.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to hear from Olaf this week about, what they're working on, because after what he talked about in the post game, build-up's going to be the hot button word down at City Park training this week. There's no doubt about that in my mind. So we're going to be talking to him about that. I'm going to be fascinated to hear what his opinion on it and see how much actually he's willing to shine a light on it. We also seen consistently off the bench, I think just off the top of my head, the only is Morales the only guy to sub off the bench in both games?
Yes, because Yarrow started against the Rapids,
started,
right?
So I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure Morales is the only sub in both games. And so maybe we see something along the lines of, I'm just going to rip this off the top of my head, so I might be wrong. So our back 5 stays as it is. Maybe we get Baumgartel when he's not sick. For one of the other 3, maybe that. I mean, I think that's there's always a chance for that to happen. I mean, him being sick might have changed things tonight. We might get Baumgartel, but that has nothing to do with the offense, so we'll leave that to later. We won't change the wing backs. We'll keep Wallem on the left. We'll keep Totland on the right. So we got 5 guys to play with. So Leuven, Hartle, gimmies. Watts is a gimme because I agree with you. He's been playing great.
So that leaves 2 up top then. So you can't do the 3-4-3 if you want to do that.
No, but what you can do is you can play Hartle up top with Klaus.
True.
And then play 3 with him in the midfield with Watts, Leuven, and Morales, which I don't honestly think. I don't honestly think that is that crazy, because Hartel now gets to range as far forward as he wants as a secondary striker role. He gets to play make with a striker in front of him in Klaus. He also will range back more because Olaf wants him to do it. Then you get more control and more ball movement and just a more veteran calming presence in Morales and just more bodies in the midfield that helps you in the press, that helps you in the counter press, that helps you not get pressed yourselves the way that San Diego was able to tonight, where they completely overload you in the midfield, because you're always going to have 3 bodies plus the potential for a Wallem to slide in to give you a 4th, or Hartel to drop back to give you a 4th. It's conservative, but it's conservative in a way that I actually think opens up and solves some of the issues we saw them have tonight.
That's interesting. The only thing I would say is Morales and Leuven, play a very similar role, which is kind of why you've seen them 1-for-1 subbed.
Yes.
So what about if you, instead of Morales, you go the route of, maybe you sit Durkin in next to Leuven, and maybe you put Watts in there in like this central, like not really an attacking mid, but almost
No,
like a
I'm good. Yeah.
hybrid pivot.
Yeah, no, I think we saw that a little bit in the preseason. That's what fascinated me so much about the preseason, because Watts was playing in the spot and Durkin wasn't. But we all were, the assumption is that it's Durkin's spot. What was the biggest problem with Durkin last year? Well, he ranged too high sometimes. When you're playing a double pivot with a back four and with such a high press and such a high overall line, you need your double pivot to play like a double pivot and not get out of position. And he too far got out of position. Well, all of a sudden the preseason comes and Leuven's playing deeper. Hartel's doing a little box to box, and Watts is just going wherever he wanted to in the preseason games. And it kind of jumped out to me as like, oh, that will work with what Chris Durkin likes to do when he likes to range a little bit too far, because there's bodies behind him. There's a third center back. Leuven's usually kind of more central, although he's still more left than central normal, but he's still a little bit more central. So to your point, and we saw it today. I mean, I don't know why I'm going all the way back to the preseason. I can go back an hour when we literally saw Chris Durkin going for Toyshirt, and we essentially did see this lineup, which is three midfielders with Leuven, Toyshirt, and Watts. The reason why I made the switch is that Durkin is obviously more defensive minded than Morales, and we're trying to, and I'm still trying to think offensively. But I like that idea because, as I'm always a big proponent of, if you can press higher, you can press harder, you can press more, you can create offense that way. And having Durkin and Watts just kind of like going gung-ho box to box while Leuven sits in a deep 8 and passes to his heart's content, I can get used to that.
I mean, it sounds pretty good to me.
I like that.
Maybe we ought to get in touch with Olaf and let him know what we're thinking here.
Again, we've already seen a lot of things that tell me that's what he's thinking as well. But that might be what we push him to this week in some of our questions to see maybe if that's what we'll see. I think the fact that Durkin for Toyshirt was maybe that wasn't the planned one at 45, but the fact that was the one they went to in the moment when they knew they were going to make a switch at 45, because at 45 it could have been Klaus for Toyshirt, Durkin for Toyshirt.
I was surprised it wasn't.
I'm surprised it wasn't Klaus as well. But I mean, I can't think of, maybe it could have been Celio for Toyshirt. Because think of two guys who aren't really ready to go 45, more attacking players who can play deeper at the same time. So I don't think there were a ton of options to replace Toyshirt. So I'm not saying the Durkin one was planned, but clearly going forward, that might give us a little bit to something to look towards of a move that Olaf likes to make when they are failing to control the midfield by adding bodies back there. I also had some people throwing out the idea they thought they saw Totlin making some inside runs, and they were like, is he playing Totlin as a more of an inverted fullback? I don't think that's what we saw, but I do want to say that is a way to solve the issues we saw tonight, which is if you're being overloaded in the midfield, one of the reasons you use an inverted fullback is to overload the midfield with a player that they're not expecting. And so, tonight, they had 4 guys consistently when you had 3, or they had 5, they brought in a 5th guy when you had 4 to break your press every time. Well, and every time that City tried to build up, they had too many bodies. They had 5 forward when City only had 4. Well, if you get an inverted fullback in there into the middle that adds another body, it rebalances the equation in your favor. I'm not saying that's what they did tonight, but going forward, a guy like Akil Watts, who has played on both sides and could play a little wingback, a guy like Conrad Wallem, who is 2-footed in a lot of ways and has played all over. They
think about putting Watts at right back.
I mean, he played right fullback. That
was his natural position for years.
Well, I actually think when his first year, he got moved to right back after being a natural center midi, and so I think this year is him moving back to his natural position after playing 2 years as the reserve second string right back, third string left back. And so now, but I think really as a guy who's so good in the midfield and so good playing box to box, I think wingback might even be a better role for him than fullback was. But again, the problem with playing him at wingback is that you're getting rid of a Toland, who I think is great, or you're getting rid of a Wallem, who I think opens up a lot of offensive possibilities. But even with, again, Watson with Wallem, they're both 2-footed players. And so that idea of an overlap or an underlapping fullback or even an inverted fullback that helps you overload the midfield, it's something that's interesting going forward, especially when you look at a back five system that they play. Just throwing it out.
I think that's a really good option to throw out there. And needless to say, there's plenty of things, to be considered by the coaching staff. And I'm sure Lutz and Olaf are probably still on the phone talking about it as we speak. So, because they've said they talk to each other more than their wives. Talk before every day in the morning, every day at night. So I'm sure they're talking about it right now. And
you know what?
They'll figure it out.
And you know what? If they're still talking about it, that says a lot. And what us still talking about it says a lot too. That means you can get all your post-game content right here on Sports Hub STL. Every St. Louis City match that they play, we will be coming to you post-game. Any major St. Louis sporting event right now, when it comes down to Mizzou, the Blues, the Cardinals, the Billikens, and St. Louis City SC, if they're playing a game, you can watch us right here on Sports Hub STL on YouTube for a live post-game show with reaction. We'll always get your chats involved whenever you drop them in as well. We're always going to be going live whenever a big thing happens in St. Louis. Breaking news, we're going live. In fact, right now, the one breaking news show we've had has been for St. Louis City SC when they made the move for Indiana Vassilev, and they also finalized the signing of Alfredo Morales. So that's what we do here on Sports Hub STL. We'll react to things as they happen, as we did today, as we will later today, because, again, it is Sunday. We will have Cards Hub 365 coming up later on today, as the Cardinals will get involved in their Sunday spring training matchup. For Will Bratton, Will, thank you so much for joining the show today. Any final thoughts as we head into another week of St. Louis City coverage?
Yeah, don't hit the panic button. Be prepared for LA Galaxy. It's going to be a good match, and even if we come out of that match with an undesirable result, we get the chance to reset back home against Seattle in the following weekend, and that's going to be probably the most important test of the start of the season for us. This is a potential contending Seattle Sounders team. Looks very good on paper. A lot of former U.S. men's national team players at home. Can we get on the score sheet in that game and come away with a victory? Those are the things we're looking forward to in the next 2 weeks.
Absolutely. It's going to be an interesting day. If you want to stick with us for your St. Louis City coverage, please do. Usually just a little inside baseball. You usually get about 2 chances to kind of tap into training and talk to the coaches and kind of see what's going on in the week. So usually that's around Tuesday and Thursday. So stay tuned to Sports Hub STL. Not only on YouTube we'll be having stuff, not only will we be talking St. Louis City on the morning show with Randy and Brooke Grimsley, also keep an eye out for any podcasts, keep an eye out for written content coming to the website, sportshubstl.com, by myself and by Will Bratton, because we will be covering you from now until the end of the City season. We just kicked it off, and we got a full season of coverage ready for you, including this week leading up to a big game for St. Louis City SC. But for now, we got to close out this post-game show because we are well into Sunday morning. Will, thank you so much for joining me today. You have
Absolutely.
a great rest of your night. St. Louis, sleep safe, and enjoy, so far, no goals allowed by your soccer team. Have a great night, St. Louis.